Continuing our discussion on the Southern Realms legendary lords, I want to talk about Christopher Columbus. Or, should I say, Marco Colombo. This is the Dogs of War special character that best kind of gives that nod to, well, again, Christopher Columbus. He's an individual who discovers the New World as it is, and really sets the pace for what we get in Total War Warhammer 2 with Port Reaver and so on and so forth. So, we're going to dive into the lore of Marco Colombo from the 5th edition Dogs of War book. We're going to talk about his special rules, and then we're going to talk about his magic items. And we're going to cross-reference those with Cataph's Southern Realms mod, just like we've done with Lucrezia Belladonna, as well as Borgia Lubici. And the lore blurb on him is quite small for Marco, so let's just dive right on into Marco Colombo. Marco Colombo is best known as the explorer who discovered Lustria, although it was really discovered years before by the Norse. Marco was, however, the first Old Worlder to establish friendly relations with the Lizardmen. Not an easy thing to do. Before Marco's epic voyage to Lustria, he had visited Araby as a merchant and taken part in various sea fights along the coast of Araby and around the pirate stronghold of Sartosa. Marco was therefore already a seasoned campaigner and known as a mercenary captain before making his name as an explorer. On his return from Lustria with a great fortune in gold and gems, he took over the army of his patron as a mercenary general and made himself Prince of Trantillo. After that, he led the army of Trantillo against rival cities on several occasions, as well as occasional expeditions beyond the Appuccini Mountains. He also sent further expeditions to Lustria in order to seek the fabled Norse colony of Skeggi, which they eventually discovered after several years of searching. Marco was one of several famous Tilian mercenary generals who not only led armies in the wars of Tilia, but also in distant tropical regions against strange and unknown opponents. Marco Colombo's history gets fleshed out a little bit more in the 3rd edition Warhammer RPG books, but we're not really going to go into that as much right here. He is a unique character because he's one of the only ones that is ranged from the special characters that are limited to you in the 5th edition army book for the Dogs of War. He has a nice, lovely little crossbow. He is armed with a sword, a lance, a light armor, crossbow, and shield, and he rides a warhorse. Very simple kind of array. He has a series of special rules, though. He has some magic items. We're going to go through once we bring up Cataph's Southern Realm mod, and we'll go through that on the campaign screen, because that's where we can see a lot of these things being kind of embellished and brought together. But the really interesting thing about Marco Colombo is he has like almost the exact history of Christopher Columbus, as far as like, oh, he discovered the New World. Well, so did the Norse first. It's kind of an interesting little juxtaposition, and that's what I was talking about, the Dogs of War army list. It's a very self-aware army list. It's a lot of tongue-in-cheek commentary, a lot of little jokes here and there, like the first Old Worlder to establish friendly relations with the Lizardmen. Not an easy thing to do. Like, you know, a lot less serious than what we get with the grim dark of 6th edition and beyond with Warhammer Fantasy, something that it heavily borrows from Warhammer 40,000. 5th edition and under for Warhammer Fantasy was a little bit more of a relaxed and comedic approach to the fantasy world. But let's dive into the Cataph Southern Realm mod, as well as the magic items and special rules from the 5th edition Dogs of War book, and how they really correspond. We'll talk about, you know, how I think that they might be different, or if they're kind of spot on the interpretation from the army book. Alright, so we're in here with the Cataph Southern Realms mod. Let's take a look at what we get as access to big old Marco Colombo here. So we can already see that we start here in Port Reaver in the New World, which is pretty cool. I think that's kind of very lore friendly, you know, I would say. Like how it also says, like, they couldn't find Skeggi. Well, just go a little bit to the north, guy. In lore, it's actually kind of like hidden away, like in like a swamp, at the end of a swamp, in like a clearing. I get it. But he has some really cool stuff with his special technologies. He gets these two right here. Legacy of the Old Ones, Flourishing Southern Trade, and then some interesting thing with his Regiments of Renown, they're actually locked by a research. It's not like that for the other lords in Cataph's Southern Realms mod. So that's a pretty interesting touch here that, okay, in order to get these guys, you kind of have to coax them all the way over to the New World. It's a kind of an interesting little touch. Also, Conquistador Lords, reducing the attrition for swamp damage, Brave New World, upkeep reductions, construction time reductions, and public order increases, but also a huge suffer to diplomatic relations with your Southern Realm counterparts. So, interesting little choices for the research, and I think very, very on point, very on brand for him. Let's take a look at his special abilities. take a look. This is not Karl Franz, but Marco Colombo's Navigators and Entrepreneurs. So diplomatic relations -20 with the Hunts Marshals expedition, interestingly enough, and leadership +10 when fighting against rogue armies, since you deal with so many of them out in this little gulf outside of this area, as well as on land. And attrition -80% casualties suffered from high seas attrition, which is cool because, you know, if you do decide you want to go unite the Southern Realms, there are high seas attrition around here, so you can come back over this direction. High seas attrition is there, like that's where it begins, high seas attrition. So you can really get some playability, even jumping across to Ulthuan. So I like that ability, right? Marco Colombo is this explorer. He found the new world in this in the lore for the Southern Realm, so it makes sense that he would be somewhat immune to that kind of attrition. Looking at his character details, he gets first contact. Marco Colombo is famous for having discovered the new world, and for being one of the very few to have peaceful dealings with the Lizardmen. So diplomatic relations +30, campaign movement range +10, and ambush defense chance +50. I think, again, a really cool thematic way to include this character in the lot and giving that nod to his affiliation with the Lizardmen. Let's take a look at the skills here. Anytime the screen kind of pauses or anything like that, it's because I have the 5th edition army book up on my right-hand screen, so it kind of locks Total War Warhammer, so just ignore that if you see it. So let's talk real quick about his special items and his special rules that he had in 5th edition. So in 5th edition, he had the special rule of Crossbow Hunter. Marco is an expert huntsman with the crossbow who enjoys chasing big game and gigantic monsters on his tropical expeditions. Marco is armed with a crossbow which he can use while mounted and may move and shoot from the saddle. Of course, Marco is quite a marksman with his crossbow, as reflected by his ballistic skill. Then his other special rule is Navigator's Telescope. Marco has a special high-power telescope which he uses at sea. It is so powerful that he can use it to spy out hidden enemy troops lurking in cover or in the midst of a regiment. Any troops or characters which would normally count as hidden or unseen until revealed, such as Goblin Fanatics, Dark Elf Assassins, or Wood Elf Waywatchers, can be seen by Marco on a dice score of 4 up. So these two items, I think, make a very good translation into Cataph Southern Realm mod. So special rules. For one, look here, where is it? He has, I just saw it. Oh, there it is. The Navigator's Telescope. So it says, will spot invisible units within 200 meters, plus 300% visibility range, and plus 300% forest spotting. So I think that's a really cool nod to this. His missile damage I think is a little low for him having a crossbow. It does 60 AP damage, which is pretty cool. And it has 180 range, which is actually pretty devastating. But I think for a single entity, this has to be a little bit higher in general. He does get full marksman, which I would say is kind of that kind of lean over from Crossbow Hunter, which increases the range and ammunition as well as missile damage for all missile infantry within the Lord's army. That's a nifty little treat that he gets. For the most part, his very bottom branch, his blue branch is the same, and as well as his red branch is the same for, I'd say, a Merchant Prince. His yellow branch over here, nothing too crazy. He gets Fleet Finger, which helps his reload reduction, and Piercing Shots, which helps his missile damage. But before we jump into his magic items, there's a really cool nod that Cataph did for this special line for Marco Colombo. So he gets skink contacts. Making friends with skink interpreters isn't easy, but the more contacts you have, the more you understand each other, the more business can be done. So he gets diplomatic relation bonuses with lizardmen, tradable resources, income from ports bonuses, and this really kind of spans over to kill beastmen, helping out with any kind of beastman bray herds he has to deal with. Kill a Jakota. That's a rat, right? Yes, that's a rat. I was worried you'd say that. So that helps out with Skaven. Kill Conks, which is Dark Elves. Kill Greenskins, which is Greenskins. Kill High Elves. Oh, I thought that was, I'm sorry. I thought Conks was going to be Elf. No, so this is Warriors of Chaos and Norska. And then kill Undead. So you can really choose skink contacts, and then after rank 2, and then you can choose these things as you see fit to whoever you're fighting, right? So, okay, kill undead. I think that's what makes Marco Colombo's starting position so unique in this mod, is that he starts centralized to all of these as having them as natural opponents. So you can really choose what makes the most sense. Then befriend the priests. Skink priests like their prophetic mumbo jumbo, but their needs are just as businesslike as anybody else's, and they pay in pearls as big as eyes. So a further increase to diplomatic relations, reduction in attrition from swamp attrition. That would 50% plus the 33% from the research would be an 88 or 83% reduction in attrition from swamp, which is pretty nifty. Untainted, income from ports, and income from tradable resources. Befriend the Slann helps out even further with Lizardmen, magic resistance for local armies, and Untainted, as well as the army ability Holy Stella, which helps out with accuracy and missile damage. Then lastly, Secrets of the Lizards gives you an increase to your Battle Wizard recruitment rank, Untainted, melee defense when fighting against Lizardmen, and bonus versus large when fighting against Lizardmen. And I think that's a cool one, bonus versus large when fighting against Lizardmen. I like that a lot. And we do know that this gentleman is the Prince of Trontio. And so as thus he gets reinforcements from Trontio. Until he is usurped, these things tend to happen in Utilia, and especially in Trontio. Colombo is still Prince, with friends over there. That was a weird vocal inflection. Armored friends. So experience +3 for all Pavis crossbowmen, broken lances, and noble retinue. Now, as we look at his special abilities here, also he gets a Warhorse and Doom crossbolt, which is interesting here. Okay, so there it is. I was gonna say, man, it's kind of, he has a very underwhelming stat line. So there it is. So actually, once he reaches rank 5 and increases to a Warhorse, which is what he has in the tabletop, he gets AP and miss and magic damage at 360 missile damage. So that makes sense. So once you get into ranks 5 and upgrade it, then it kind of comes a little bit more in line to what I would expect from this character to do. But I like that. And he also gets fire wheels to moving, because, you know, that kind of gives that nod from his crossbow hunter special rule that says that he can fire while on the saddle. So I could really get behind that. So I could see what he did there. Gets a barbed Ithilmar steed, in fact, but I don't think it's actually an Ithilmar. I've not played this character to that point. So he's got 3 little items here, and these are straight out of the rulebook. So we're going to read the rulebook first, then we'll read the item in game. So the Gem of Lustria. While in Lustria, Marco acquired this strange gem as part of his reward for serving the Slann mage priests as a mercenary. The gem is made of a polished green stone and shaped in the form of a snake's tongue, the mark of the lizardman serpent god Sotek. While wearing this talisman, Marco may reroll 1 failed armor save. And this just gives him physical resistance. It helps out with enemy hero action success chance, and Untainted in Total War Warhammer. And I think that maybe ward save would be a little bit more on target here than physical resistance. But I do think that the enemy hero action success chance is kind of fun. I like that. I like that kind of nod to that whole giving protection from Sotek. Untainted, I also could see as well. Just because like the vehemency of all of the zealotry, I guess you could say, actually, of the worshippers of Sotek, and it being very much about purification in a lot of ways. So I could see the nod to Untainted here, and it's a great way to kind of combat a lot of the different types of, not attrition, but corruption you're going to deal with across Vampiric, Skaven, and Chaos when you deal with that from Norsca and the such. So Gem of Lustria, I think, kind of pays a good homage here to its tabletop counterpart. Let's read the Gourd of Lustrian Wine. Marco always keeps with him his last remaining gourd of cactus juice, which he calls Lustrian Wine. This was given to him by the Skinks during his expedition to Lustria. Although it is about as potent as orange juice from a lizardman, for a human being it is prickly stuff indeed. A swig from the gourd at the start of his turn will boost Marco's strength by +d6 for the rest of that turn. And when we take a look at this in Total War Warhammer with Cataph's mod, I think this is a very solid translation. Plus 50% AP damage. Now, when I see armor piercing damage, I think of only weapon strength RP or AP damage. I think it has to say 50% missile armor piercing damage for it to include the bow. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but it would make sense to me. You're increasing the strength of the character in tabletop, and your strength based off of the unit's toughness, determined your to wound abilities. So having a higher strength, in my mind, translates to a higher weapon strength. Having a higher melee attack would translate, or would be translated from higher weapon skill from the tabletop. So I think this is a really good true to form ability here. Nothing too over the top. It does last for 30 seconds, which is quite a long time, but this guy's not going to be in close combat enough, I think, to really get that to the fore. But I think it's kind of a cool thing for when he actually is in combat. So our last item here is the Scroll of Araby. While stopping off in Lashik, Marco did the usual foray into the bazaar looking for maps. One map, although uninteresting in itself, was written on an old scroll with partly obliterated arcane writing of ancient Khemri on the reverse. The scroll gives Marco, but not the rest of the unit he is with, a magical save of 2 up against the effect of any spell. However, he will only use it once per turn as part of the ancient scroll crumbles to dust each time it is used. So, kind of playing a direct nod to the magical resistance, I think this works out very well. It's got a one-time use in combat, just like it does right here. The Scroll of Araby's got a one-time per turn. What is per turn? I wonder if I meant to say per battle. But per turn. So Scroll of Araby can only be used once in per fight, and it gives you 80% magic resistance. That's a pretty substantial amount of magic resistance. And again, it's a pretty good nod to the 2-up magic resistance you get from the scroll in the game. Also, enemy wins a magic power reserve is -15 in the local region, and untainted +1. I like the enemy wins of magic power reserve reduction. It goes a little bit further into the magic resistance portion of it, and I think that it's on brand again for a unique item on a campaign perspective. You always want these certain campaign effects in addition to the item's actual battle effects to kind of get that 1-2 punch and increase its effectiveness in campaign. So as a whole, I think Cataph did a really good job of creating Marco Colombo true to form in a way that I could see Creative Assembly putting him into the game. I think it really depends how Creative Assembly would create the generic yellow, red, and blue lines for the Southern Realms if they were to be added. But I think as a whole, this character kind of gives that solid nod to being a Tilean prince that is focused around range combat. I would say that what we've seen so far from the Hunts Marshal's expedition, and of course Hunts Marshal himself, and having the ability to get out of combat quickly, I think is advantageous. Him being on a horse and being able to fire whilst moving is very awesome indeed. I don't think he has a 360 fire arc. Don't really believe he does from looking at this so far. I don't think anything tells me that. But either way, I like that he gets a lot of diplomatic relation bonuses with the Lizardmen, because you don't get that if you're the Hunts Marshal, that's for sure. So I think having a character start in Port Reaver that also has a natural inclination to ally with Lizardmen makes for a fun and interesting campaign. Like if you take a look at this ownership, again, you have Vampire Coast here, you've got Greenskins here, more Vampire Coast here, High Elves here, Dark Elves here. So you're smack dab in the middle of a lot of voracious opponents, and having the Lizardmen becoming natural allies, I think, is a really good call for doing a Marco Colombo campaign. So we'll hopefully see something like this coming in the future days with Total War Warhammer 2, but hopefully you guys are enjoying this little series on the Tilean Legendary Lords. If you have any idea for a Legendary Lord you'd like me to go into, please go ahead and let me know in the comments below. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that action. But have a good one, and take care.